Sexual misconduct in the clergy is making recent headlines in this country and in others, but it is not a new concern for organized religion.
It is believed that sexual abuse has gone on for centuries. In tonight's Eyewitness News Extra, Steve Boyd meets one alleged victim of child abuse in the church. She is one of thousands of victims now speaking out in a crisis to the clergy.
It pretty much began with subtle things, things that he would do to other kids as well, like hugging kids, but the hugging started turning into more of a caressing hug than a regular hug, and it eventually turned into molestation and rape.
Nora Kovac was 12 years old when her abuse first began. She says her abuser was a high-ranking church official, not a priest or minister in her Buffalo parish, but high-ranking enough that he administered communion. Years after the abuse, Nora went to church officials to tell her secret. What happened to her next is what has happened to victims for centuries.
When I went to the church, they said that it was probably an isolated case, and why couldn't I just keep my mouth shut about it?
It was even suggested that she move to another city. It was exactly the opposite of what victims want when they finally come forward. What they want is to begin healing. Many desperately need counseling, and they expect the church to pay for that. They often need pastoral help in restoring their faith, and most often they want justice. They want to make sure the perpetrator can't victimize someone else. All that is not a lot to ask considering what victims lose. What they've lost is a sense of self-worth. They've lost a place in the church community because most are ostracized from their parish. And perhaps most importantly, they lose their faith in God.
You're violating people's sense of faith, people's sense of God, and you are taking away from them the one thing that has carried them through all the other crises of their lives.
The way the church handled it did as much abuse as the person who committed the crime to begin with.
The issue of abuse as a crime is an interesting one because, as we've learned in cases we've seen over the last several months, many times alleged abusers never face criminal prosecution. And that's because their alleged victims generally come forward many years after the abuse takes place, many years after the criminal statute of limitations has already expired. In Buffalo, Steve Boyd, Eyewitness News.
Nora Kovac has gone through extensive counseling. She was instrumental in assisting the Episcopal Diocese of Western New York to develop a policy on sexual misconduct in the priesthood. Tomorrow, Steve will examine the subject of Catholic celibacy and its alleged relationship to sexual abuse.